Bam, 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 bam. Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Brooks here. Today we're talking about the new Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. I saw it last week and was truly impressed. I think if you guys like The Force Awakens and Rogue One, The Last Jedi is definitely worth a watch. I heard it was sold out everywhere on Thursday and Friday. I ended up having to get tickets on Fandango ahead of time, which cost an extra $1 but was totally worth it. I highly recommend this movie to all the Star Wars fans out there, but there are definitely some questionable things in the movie too. A lot of the same problems The Force Awakens had pop up here as well. So today we're going to go over all that, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly parts of The Last Jedi. And we'll even try to explain the Rotten Tomatoes rating of the movie, which is at a high 93%, while in contrast, the audience score is at a much lower 56%. We're going to get to all that soon, so spoiler warnings ahead. We will be talking about a lot of the plot, and even some of the ending too, so don't watch any further if you're still waiting to see the movie. But if you've seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers, let's go and get started. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by the Star Wars community on Amino. Amino is a free app you can find on your iPhone or Android app store. It's a network of communities that lets you explore, discover, and obsess over the things you're into. Each community has great content, the friendliest of people, and even exciting events. And one of the best pages on there is simply called Star Wars, which is the ultimate place for Star Wars fans to discuss the movies, read up on its content, share art, and engage with thousands of other fans from around the world. Needless to say, the Force is strong in this group.
Looking? Found someone you have, I would say.
Right.
With that said, I highly recommend you guys try out the Star Wars community on Amino today. Link in the description below, or you can just type in Star-Wars on the Amino app. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get back to Star Wars The Last Jedi. I suppose the best place to start in this review is the good, because overall the movie was very good. Well made, well shot, good acting and story, and even a few interesting twists in there, and some surprises. I would say one of my favorite performances was Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, or as he was often called in this new movie, Ben, which is his original name. Driver did some really great acting work in this movie. He stole every scene he was in, because he does a great job at playing this conflicted villain who almost turns good again in the middle of the movie, but by the end, he goes full villain. Let me explain. About halfway through the movie, Kylo and Rey face off against Snoke, the Supreme Leader. He's the big, bad, creepy villain who runs the First Order. This was one of the best scenes of the whole movie by far. There was serious tension between Kylo and his master Snoke, who was reading his mind and figuring out how Kylo didn't have the heart to kill his mother Leia, like how he killed Han in the last movie, The Force Awakens. This causes Kylo to not only turn on Snoke, but he also joins forces with Rey here, as they take on the Red Armored Guards, as a team, as a duo. In this fight scene with the guards versus Kylo and Rey, that was the fucking shit, man. That was a good one. They battle numerous highly trained Red Guards, who have their own weapons like laser whips and staffs and everything. And I really liked the room this fight was set in. It was eerie and it had these bright red walls, cold steel on the floor. It was a very scary place. So, in order to break out, the only chance Rey and now Ben have to survive is to work together. They're fighting and dueling with the guards and getting in sync. I even think there was a sort of unspoken Force connection that allowed them to link up and communicate without words. They're reading each other's minds and sending words to each other, kind of like a cordless telephone. And it was a great fight to see too. And it started with an amazing twist, when at the beginning, Kylo turns the lightsaber that's setting on Snoke's chair, he turns it on and slices Snoke in half with it, with his Force powers, killing the Supreme Leader. And in following the fight and the defeat of Snoke and the Red Guards, Kylo Ren himself actually takes over the whole First Order. He goes full villain. The other strong characters in the movie were obviously Daisy Ridley as Rey and, of course, Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. They spent a lot of screen time together on Luke's little island, talking about the Force, training, and digging into what was going on with the plot. And it looks like Luke has become the sort of Yoda for this series. I especially got that vibe when Rey first meets Luke at the beginning. She hands him his blue lightsaber and he quickly just throws it over his shoulder and walks away. And then he does some other erratic, kooky things like hiding in his hut and stuff, and just in general being quiet and dismissive of Rey in the beginning. This really reminds me a lot of how Yoda acted in Empire Strikes Back. But don't worry, this movie doesn't retread that movie too much. There are a few places that echo the movie Empire here, but things end up changing and being so different and interesting in The Last Jedi, you pretty much forget about that. It's not really a remake like how The Force Awakens was. There's just a few things that are kinda similar. But back to Luke, following his storyline, near the end he really shines in one of the final battle scenes. Another one of the greatest sequences of the movie. Towards the end, the Resistance faces off with the First Order on a planet called Crate, and after some fights between the two sides' ships and their laser weapons, Luke steps out in the middle of the battle to face Kylo Ren, one-on-one. And here we get another amazing fight scene, both for Luke and Kylo. Luke dodges and rolls around almost all of Kylo's attacks. One dodge even sees Luke dip back like he's playing limbo. He leans way back, which kind of looked like a move out of the Matrix movie. It was a very Matrix-y style move, I have to admit. A little questionable maybe, but I still think it worked. But Luke wasn't able to dodge everything. Kylo's swordplay is just too well done, which is another bonus for Adam Driver's performance. With that said, Kylo eventually gets a couple hits in on Luke with his laser sword, but for some reason, Luke remains unscathed. And when we discover why, the reason is Luke wasn't actually there at the fight at all. He was projecting an image of himself there with the Force, as a trick to distract Kylo and the First Order. Once you realize this and you look back, things make a lot of sense. You see, the projection, the fake Luke, looked a little different than the way he looked in the rest of the movie. Most of the movie, Luke has long hair and a disheveled beard, and he's wearing old clothes. While his projection in the Crate fight scene, he looks like he got a haircut and trimmed his beard, and has nicer clothes, and he even uses his old blue lightsaber, which was actually already broken earlier in the movie, I believe. And lastly, another sign you might have noticed he was a projection was the sand on the ground. As Kylo walks around in their fight, his feet kick around sand on the ground, but with Luke's projection, if you're paying attention, you don't see any sand moving from his feet. There's no sand kicking or even any footprints at all. And you put all this together, all these details, the projection, the fight, and the execution, that's what makes this final duel scene at Crate to be one of the best of the whole movie. Next, let's move on to some of the bad parts of the movie, which brings us to Finn and his side story. Him and his new Asian girlfriend go on this little side mission to find some stupid codes or something. Honestly, it's hard for me to really remember what was going on with Finn. What I do remember though is his storyline was pretty much the worst part of the movie. Every time you start getting into it with Luke and Rey or Snoke and Kylo, things are getting good and tense. Then all of a sudden it cuts back to Finn and energy of the movie kind of fizzles out. The Finn scenes didn't really seem to fit. This is kind of like how in The Force Awakens, how Finn seems like an extra character who doesn't even really need to be there. Now I know there are justifications for him in both the movies, but I truly think Finn's whole bit could have been cut out. Which brings me to the next bad thing about the movie here. The Last Jedi is a bit too long. Now I normally wouldn't complain about length, since with Star Wars you always seem to want more, but when you start to realize the Finn story seems like a whole separate movie anyway, well, Last Jedi just seems like it could have done better without it. The runtime was already 2.5 hours, which surprised me. In the movie it didn't really feel that long, but I think cutting Finn's stuff down and making this movie the usual 2-hour length would have made the whole experience worlds better, pun intended. Lastly, let's talk about the ugly parts of the movie, the worst parts of The Last Jedi. First of which was the weird Princess Leia becomes Superman part. At one point somewhere in the middle of the movie, Leia gets blown out of her ship in battle. I think it's more towards the end. And when she gets blown out of a ship, she starts floating around in space, seemingly dead and lifeless. And many people watching probably thought this would have been a perfect way to end this character, Princess Leia, especially considering the actress playing her, Carrie Fisher, recently passed away and won't be returning to the series obviously. Rest in peace. But instead of giving Leia this perfectly timed space send-off here, just when you think she's gone, you see her hand twitch a little bit. Leia comes back to life and seemingly moves her body with her force powers, bringing her back into one of the remaining Resistance ships. She kind of just floats herself like she's flying like a superhero. The whole sequence is highly animated, and that's why I say it looks a little Superman-like. That and the way she flies. It kind of looks like him, and it looked kind of odd. It was a very weird scene. Definitely could have used some work. On the bright side though, I was happy they made this interesting choice. Taking that risk is admirable, but I think it would have been worlds better to just let Leia die there. It was definitely a missed opportunity. And the last ugly thing I'll be talking about is the conflicting tone of The Last Jedi, namely from all the jokes they try to squeeze in, often at the wrong time and in the wrong places. For example, remember that excellent fight scene I mentioned where Rey and Kylo team up? Well, it was tense in there to say the least, but for some reason they decided to squeeze a joke in there, during their telepathic talking part, nonetheless. I just don't think it worked. worked. It was the wrong time. And this instance was emblematic for this problem of the movie. Too many jokes in the wrong places. It really pulls you out of the seriousness of things, and the intensity sucks the life out of the room. And back to The Force Awakens, the previous movie in this trilogy, many had similar complaints of the overuse of humor there, but I think it worked in that one more. The Force Awakens was overall a less serious movie. It was more of a fun but epic space romp. The Last Jedi isn't quite like that. It doesn't have that tone at all. For the most part, it's a serious, intense, kind of sad movie. Lots of losses in there. Many deaths and lies and betrayals. The stakes are high, and so things seem to be more serious. That is until they whip out their Marvel-esque one-liners, which worked well in movies like Thor Ragnarok, but for Star Wars, not so much. In the end, Star Wars The Last Jedi wasn't perfect, sure, but overall I still think it was a great movie. This is just me nitpicking the world's most beloved franchise, and one of my personal favorites as well. At the end of the day, it's still an excellent movie and a worthy addition to the franchise. Sure, it could have been shorter and less jokey, but that's a small price to pay to see Luke and Leia on screen again in 2017. Oh, and did I mention Yoda makes a cameo at the end? Almost forgot about that part. Yoda comes in with some sage advice for Luke at the end, and he tells him that Rey has everything she needs to carry on the Jedi ways. It was really fun to see. And as for the disparity between the Rotten Tomatoes ratings, well, I think some fans were just not as into it as maybe the critics were, and they're also probably turned off by how long it was. I think that's a big kicker for most fans. It seemed a little long. Could have used an intermission. I know myself, I needed a potty break. What do you guys think? Did you love or hate The Last Jedi? What were your favorite and least favorite parts of the movie? And who else wants to go out and buy a Porg plush doll after seeing those cute little critters in the movie? I know I do. Hell, I'd even try eating one. When Chewbacca roasted that one for his dinner, I gotta admit, that shit looked tasty as fuck. Comment your thoughts on the movie below, and thanks for watching. We'll see y'all next time.
The thing is, John and I used to take the mick out of each other all the time. Hey, it's all like, hey, I'm fun and I'm cool. Come along on this ride with me, that sort of thing. I have not managed to change my dad's mind. He is still very much a Star Trek fan.